Clemson's got its opponents all lined up and dates and everything included. We will check it out right now for 2024. We got Jason Priester on the line from allclemsontigers.com to break it down. Jason, I will pull up the schedule here, but you can lead us off by letting us know how it hit you initially.
I think, it's a rough opening few weeks there over the first 4 or 5 weeks. You start off with Georgia, one of the best teams in the country. And then you get your G5 opponent at home the next week. And this year, that's App State. And App State, certainly no pushover. Never want to overlook those guys. You get an open date after that and then host North Carolina State, who I think is going to be really good next year. I think Dave Dorn's done a remarkable job at, supplementing, his roster with some talent from the portal. I think that the Pac's going to be one of the better teams in the ACC next year. And then you get a home game, Clemson's first ever game against Stanford, and then on the road to Tallahassee. Clemson and their former quarterback DJ Uyunglele. So that's what stands out to me the most. Those first 5 weeks of the season. 5 games of the season. You got Georgia, North Carolina State, Florida State, all in those first 5 games. Going to learn a lot about this team really quick this year because it starts off real fast for them.
Yeah, so we get hit with Georgia. We don't really even need to analyze that game. You're playing the best program in the country. I know they didn't win the national championship, but it's the best football program in the country, and it's going to be the number 1 team in the country most likely. And we saw these two get together in Charlotte. Let's see, that would have been 2021, the year Georgia won the national championship, and Clemson was right there. It was a defensive struggle. You had that pick 6 from DJ, and he was just under siege all night from that Georgia defense, and it kind of gave us a precursor to what Georgia was going to look like that year. And considering how dominant they were the rest of the year, it was actually a pretty good performance by Clemson. It was a 1-score game, and kind of interesting to think back. That was only going on 3 years, and you had DJ Uyunglele playing his first official start as the starter for Clemson, and you had JT Daniels on the other side for Georgia, and of course he didn't finish out the year, but Georgia won it all. As you mentioned, there's usually an FCS game near the start of the season. In App State, sure, Clemson's going to be a substantial favorite. They should win the game, but App State's no joke. They show up and play everybody difficult. Just ask North Carolina, who schedules them on a regular basis, and they're always playing some kind of 45-40 game or overtime game with North Carolina. So that's not an easy deal. And then, of course, as you mentioned, NC State coming off a nice 9-3 season, bowl loss 9-4. Stanford and Clemson, this might have been a few years before your time. They played in I don't remember which, might have been a Gator Bowl.
Yeah, bowl game. I meant to say the first time they're coming to Clemson, but yeah, I remember when Stanford and Clemson played in the bowl game back
88.
Yeah, I think it was late 80s.
Around there.
Yeah, I do remember that.
But that's just funny that's a conference game. Playing Stanford, that's crazy.
Stanford's ready to come into the league and kick the door in, man. Come on.
The Cardinal. All right. They didn't show up last year. They were 3-9 under their first-year head coach, Troy Taylor. Florida State, obviously, that's got to be pinpointed as the game of the year, not just for Clemson, but at this point, the ACC, and maybe Florida State comes back down to earth, and you got to figure that's about a must-win situation after that overtime excruciating loss. But yeah, those first 5 games they're pretty tough.
Yeah, you're going to find it. Like I said, we're going to know a lot about this team after the first month or so of the season. And it doesn't really let up after that. You can see it right here. I know you go to Wake, then you get Virginia at home. Those aren't going to be real tough games, but Louisville's going to be much better than what they were in year 1, and they were pretty good under Jeff Brom in his first season. I expect the Hokies to be better, and I don't know about Pitt, but Clemson's been up there one time and lost the only time they've been up there. Then you get your FCS team right before the South Carolina game. Clemson does that. The ACC does that every now and then. Gives those ACC teams that play an SEC rival an FCS game right before that rivalry game because the SEC likes to do it, so the ACC does it from time to time. But then you get the Gamecocks coming into Clemson. Last time they came into Clemson, they snapped Clemson's long home winning streak. I know Clemson beat them in Columbia last year, but they're not going to be quick to forget the last time Clemson or South Carolina visited Death Valley. But back half the schedule not quite as tough as the front half, but you got those two back-to-back road games there, Virginia Tech or at Virginia Tech and at Pitt. That won't be an easy stretch. Probably absolutely the most difficult part of the back half of the schedule.
I would have to go through the entire ACC and go schedule by schedule. Of course, they've got their permanent opponents that they've locked in for each team. But in terms of measuring how difficult the schedules are against each other, but I will say, since we've got a Florida State show and a Miami show on Wednesday night, just looking at those, the first thing I did, because just on face value, you can see Florida State schedule so much harder than Miami's. So what I did is I basically just threw out who are they both playing. So those are obviously even. And then the FCS game, that's the same. So they've got 5 different opponents, and Florida State's got to play Notre Dame, Clemson, North Carolina. Just all 5 are much more difficult games. Louisville's the only game that Florida State misses that is a fairly difficult game for Miami. So it's not even close. Now, this seems like a pretty balanced schedule. There's no Miami, North Carolina, so you miss 2 of the better teams that would be expected to be 2 of the better teams in the league. But Louisville's there, Florida State's there, NC State's there. Don't know what to think about Pitt. Normally, I would say, wow, that's going to be a tricky one. November game at Pitt, but man, they were so awful last year. This is a big year for them to get it turned around. So, yeah, we shall see. Virginia Tech came back, had a better team last year under Brent Pry in his second season. So we'll see if they're truly on the upswing or if that was just a weak schedule that helped them out and built them up. And as you mentioned, South Carolina kind of in that same place where, okay, which direction are they headed? Because Shane Beamer seemed to have them in the right path, and then they took a big step back last year.
Yeah, I'm like you, man. That Pitt team, I just don't know what to think about them. But I do know you're going on the road at Virginia Tech, at Pitt, back-to-back weeks, middle of November. It's probably going to be freezing. That's something Clemson doesn't face every week. But, also agree that I don't know what you're going to get with South Carolina. They got hit by so hard with portal departures, and he's had to go back to the portal. Beamer has again this year, hit it hard and heavy. I'm a big believer in the guy they got at quarterback, Lenore Sellers. I just don't know if they've got all the pieces around him to be that much better than what they were. Do think Louisville is going to be pretty good. I agree with you. They got the benefit of a fairly weak schedule last year, but expect them to take a big jump year 2 under Jeff Brom. But no Miami, no North Carolina, no Notre Dame. Clemson got all those into rotation last season, so it does play out a little bit in their favor, but it's not as easy as some of the schedules I've seen Clemson come away with over the years. Let's put it that way. There's some teeth in this thing, particularly over the first half.
I am not making any kind of crazy prediction here, but I'm just saying Virginia last year, they were only 3-9. They got blown out like twice, but they beat Duke. They beat North Carolina, and like every other game that they played really tough. So maybe Tony Elliott's going to do some good work there.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me to see that be Clemson's homecoming game. We'll see if it plays out that way. But like you said, hey, they were in a lot of those losses last year. I mean, they were competitive. Big year for Tony Elliott, man. He's got to show some improvement this year, I think. Big year.
Jason Priester, allClemsonTigers.com, breaking down Clemson's 2024 schedule. I love looking at schedules. It just makes me feel like we're closer to football. And I just like to compare them and say, what are they doing there? Why'd they give them such a tough ride? And then somebody else gets a weak one. But I know that putting all those together for a 17-team conference, which I don't think I can guarantee that's never happened before, that there's been a 17-team conference. But that's what the ACC is dealing with right now. It should be interesting.
And one thing that really stands out, you look at that thing: Clemson, North Carolina, Florida State, the three teams that all voted against expansion. Not one of them makes a trip out west this season.
Okay, I did not know.
Coincidence or not, I'm going to lean towards the latter.
I'm going to lean toward it too, because that would be a big coincidence for all three of those.
Yeah. I have a feeling that was probably worked out ahead of time, but we'll see how many favors they start doing Florida State going forward in the future.
They didn't do any favors for him this year with this schedule.
Yeah, it's not an easy one, that's for sure.
All right, Jason, we always appreciate you stopping by.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it, Mark.